been dying to ride Hollywood Rip Ride Rocket at Universal Studios, but you weren't sure if you'd fit?
Hello and welcome. Thank you so much for joining me today. My name is Katie, and for those of you who don't know me, I used to weigh 360 pounds, and I've lost 180 pounds and kept it off for years now. And on this channel, we will discuss weight loss, weight maintenance, nonsense I see online about body positivity and fat acceptance, my experiences with all of that, and well, anything else I feel like talking about. So if that sounds like something you're interested in, please go ahead and hit that subscribe button down below, and let's get into today's video. So today I have a couple of TikToks from some more new friends to the channel, as they go by on TikTok, plus size park hoppers. And they have some thoughts about going to amusement parks when plus sized. So I figure we'll go ahead and watch these together, and I'll give you my reactions along the way.
Have you been dying to ride Hollywood Rip Ride Rocket at Universal Studios, but you weren't sure if you'd fit? Hey everyone, we're plus size park hoppers, and we range in sizes from 2X to 5X. Make sure you...
Okay, so that seems to be the setup of a fair amount of their TikToks, is that they are plus size and they are trying to show people whether or not they're going to fit in certain rides at amusement parks. Which, in and of itself, I gotta be honest, I don't really have an issue with at all. I know that when I was at my heaviest, as much as I love amusement parks, I did avoid them for a very long time until I started losing weight. So I definitely can understand that this type of content would have an audience, that's for sure. So let's go ahead and see what they have to say.
Make sure you like this video and follow us for our plus size tips and tricks. Rip Ride Rocket is a thrilling roller coaster where you get to choose a song to listen to while you ride. This roller coaster goes up to 65 miles per hour and reaches heights of 167 feet. There are two discrete test seats outside of this ride. The left one is for the regular seat and the right one is for the modified seat. Katie is wearing the blood splattered dress. Sounds very funny, but it was Halloween Horror Night. She wears a size 3X top, 22 bottom, and has 65-inch hips. Unfortunately, she was not able to get the green light for the regular or the modified seat. My name is Stephanie and I am wearing the black skirt. I wear a size 2X top, 20 pants, and have 60-inch hips. I wasn't able to get the green light on the regular.
Okay, so just based off of the measurements that she's listed for the two of them, 65-inch hips and 60-inch hips, I mean, I gotta be honest, I know what size I wore when I was at my heaviest, and so while I'm not going to say that they don't wear those sizes in pants, but what I will say is I did look up Torrid's size chart, and according to Torrid's size chart, with their hips, it would put them at more closer to a 24 or 26 in pants. So I have to admit that is something that kind of stuck out to me almost right away, because I know my hips were well beyond 60 inches and probably closer to like 66 to 67 inches. And by that point, I was in a size 28 in pants. And well, quite frankly, I had not been to an amusement park in probably 4 or 5 years by that point. So again, I'm not saying that they don't wear those sizes in pants, but I do find it curious that they gave us those measurements as well, and those measurements weren't lining up with what I was finding for size charts, at least.
Regular seat at first, but when Michael pushed down, I was. One thing to note is that we heard that team members are not allowed to push down on lap bars. So I did make sure to try the modified seat as well. The modified seat...
Okay, yeah, so I'm glad that they definitely addressed that, because this isn't the first time that I've seen this in some of their videos where they're having other members of their party push down on the restraints to see if they're going to be able to fit.
I was not able to get the green light at first, but Katie gave me a push and I was able to get it to turn green. So I do think that I could have ridden this ride if the employee was willing to push down the bar for me. Unfortunately, Katie was not able to get the green light on this ride even after I pushed down on the lap bar. The lap bar is also molded for your legs, so that might be uncomfortable if you have bigger thighs. Have you been dying to ride Harry Potter and the Forbidden Journey at Universal's Islands of Adventure, but you weren't sure if you'd fit?
And at least from my experience at every amusement park I have been to, ride operators are not allowed to touch the restraints. You, as the passenger, have the responsibility to get yourself in and out of the train and in and out of the restraints without help. That's kind of one of the requirements to go on these rides. And again, I know this is just my experience, but these are going to include parks like Cedar Point. That's the one that I have been to the most and is now considered my home park. Also, growing up, we had Geauga Lake pretty much in our backyard, and then we had SeaWorld as well, and then that combined and became Six Flags Worlds of Adventure. Went back to Geauga Lake, became a water park, and then shut down, and now it's a housing development, and it's really sad. But also, Geauga Lake. Then I have gone numerous times to Kennywood as well, and this has been pretty consistent across the board. You have to be able to get yourself in and out of the train, and you have to be able to get yourself in and out of the restraints without anyone's assistance. And I gotta say, I know that they are showing these test seats, but also from my experience, I have found that sometimes these test seats don't always line up with the actual experience on the ride. And honestly, if I'm just taking a guess at what it could be, I truly think it's because those test seats get tried out far more frequently than people are actually using the seats on a train. So there's just going to be a lot more wear and tear, and things are going to get a little bit more loose on there. So I know personally, I've tried out numerous test seats that felt quite generous, and then I go and sit on the actual ride, and the ride doesn't feel quite as generous as those test seats did. And quite frankly, because of that, well, this was a little over 10 years ago now, and this was well into my weight loss journey, actually. This was a good 120 pounds down from where I started my heaviest. So I was 360 pounds when I started, and by this point I was about 240 or so roughly. And I, again, had lost 120 pounds. I knew I had dropped a lot of pant sizes by that point. And I felt fairly confident that I should be able to ride all of the rides up at Cedar Point, since I had previously gone at that size, or actually even probably a little bit heavier, and hadn't had any issues with any of the seats at the park. So I was hyping up my husband, and this was back when we were still dating, but I was hyping my husband up really hard about Cedar Point because he's from Southern California. He's from San Diego, so he's very familiar with all of the amusement parks out there, and he tells me how wonderful and how great they are. And I'm trying to explain to him that, yes, Cedar Point is every bit as good, if not better. So just be prepared. You're going to have a blast when you go there, right? And specifically, I kept hyping up my favorite roller coaster up there, Millennium Force. Now, Millennium Force, I'm going to say, at least personally, slightly more thrilling than the one they're trying out in this one. So Millennium Force has a first lift hill of over 300 feet, and you're reaching speeds over 90 miles an hour on that first hill. It is amazing. I absolutely love that ride. I've ridden it so many times, and it's still by far my favorite. So I gotta admit, I was hyping this ride up to my husband the whole time once we planned our trip and we were waiting to go. That's all I kept talking about was going on Millennium Force. And so we show up at the park and we start riding a bunch of rides. And unfortunately, Millennium Force, because it is so awesome, the line is always a bit crazy. So by the time we'd made it to that part of the park, we were looking at almost 2-hour wait times. So we figured we'd go check out some other rides and then come back a little later, and hopefully the line had dropped down a bit. So we see at one point that the line had dropped down to a 45-minute wait time, so we book it right to the line, and we get in line and wait that 45 minutes to get onto Millennium Force. And again, I had been to this park at roughly the same size or a little bit larger and been able to ride all of these rides, including Millennium Force, without any problem. So in this occasion, I didn't even think to check the test seat, if I'm being perfectly honest, because I had ridden it before and had no issues. So the first thing I do as soon as we sit down in the train is I pull the lap bar down, because that had actually proven to be the nail biter on other rides, was the lap bar. And as soon as I could get the lap bar down, I figured then I knew I could get the seatbelt on, because that's how every other ride had been so far that day. So I get the lap bar down and I get it to click, and I figure I'm in business. All I've got to do now is get that seatbelt across my hips. But unfortunately, despite having lost 120 pounds, my hips are always going to be where I carry the bulk of my weight. They're always going to be the widest part of me, and that's just the way I'm shaped no matter what I do. So trying to get that seatbelt across my hips, no matter how I tried to contort myself and squish myself into the seat, as I'd been able to do in other rides, I wasn't able to get that seatbelt to click. And I could see the ride operator coming down the platform, making his way up to our car, and I have this panic going on in my head, like, oh my gosh, I'm going to get kicked off. They're not going to let me ride. And all I need at this point is just a little bit. And I mean, it was like millimeters away and it would be able to click. There were a couple of times I actually got it to where it was seated in there, but it just was not clicking no matter what I did. And so unfortunately, the ride operator gets up to me and I'm like, do you think you might be able to do it if you're doing it from where you're standing? I'm sure this is going to click. I just can't get it to actually click. and I showed him how close it was. And that's when he did explain to me that he wasn't able to touch the restraints or help me in or out of them in any fashion, that I had to do it on my own. So even though I'm fairly confident still to this day, had he been able to do the seatbelt for me, he would have been able to, absolutely. But I also know from listing those stats just a minute ago about Millennium Force, I was about to go 300 feet in the air and go over 90 miles an hour. That was certainly not the time for me to be messing with restraints or trying to make them work for me. That's when those restraints absolutely need to work and not even be a question. So I am very glad that they did talk about that ride operators are not able to do that. But I did notice this not only in this video, but in other videos of theirs as well. So I would hate if I had watched one of those videos and they had one of their friends come along and push down the restraint on Millennium Force, and then I had gone up there assuming I'd be able to ride, only to get kicked off the ride. So seeing how they are trying out these test seats and having people push down on the restraints, it does make me wonder if they're actually riding some of these rides or if they're just trying out to see if they even could. So that being said, if you wish to go to an amusement park and you are uncertain if you're going to be able to fit, I would actually just go by the park's guidelines and recommendations. I know all the parks that I personally have gone to, they're going to have their guidelines listed for who can and can't ride rides, whether that be for height restrictions or potentially for customers of size. So at least personally, I would feel much more comfortable referring to park guidelines as opposed to individuals who are using others to push down on their restraints.
Is located in row 4. It was able to fit in the modified seat without any issues. If you are in a wheelchair, you must transfer from your wheelchair into the ride vehicle. I actually didn't end up riding this ride because it looked a little too scary for me. If you wear a size 2X or smaller, you should be able to ride this ride comfortably in the modified seat. We hope that these tips help, and let us know what your favorite song for this ride is in the comments.
So there we have it. There's some tips for you if evidently you wish to ride that ride and you aren't certain if you're going to fit. Where, again, I personally would feel much more comfortable checking out the guidelines from the actual park themselves, especially seeing how they were trying to push down on those restraints. I gotta be honest, that's just something that makes me incredibly nervous, especially knowing that there have been unfortunate outcomes when people were not using restraints correctly on amusement park rides. So I feel like if they are going to demonstrate that, it should be done in the proper fashion and not having their friends or other people push down on restraints. But maybe that's just me. Let's go ahead and take a look at this next TikTok.
Here's what we eat in a day at Disney World as 5 plus-size best friends. We started in Animal Kingdom where Sarah and Deanna shared the colossal cinnamon roll. This is one of their favorites. Me, Ashley, and Katie started with the coconut cold brew from Kusafiri. It is so good. I got the marinated chicken flatbread from Kusafiri, and Ashley got the one with pork. Mine was a little too spicy for me, so I just ate my chips and gave the flatbread to Michael. He's the best. Katie got a breakfast Dole Whip from Tamu Tamu Refreshments, which melted very quickly because it was so hot. And
Okay, a breakfast Dole Whip? What? Okay, I must admit, I've never been to Disney and I've never had Dole Whip, but that's kind of like an ice cream type food, right? It's a frozen sweet treat, right? That's at least my understanding of it. And we're gonna have that a breakfast one? What? I get it when you are at an amusement park or you're on vacation. Most people are going to be eating outside of their normal habits and routines, and there's typically nothing wrong with that unless you're taking a lot of vacations or you go to the amusement park a lot. But if it's like once or twice a year that you do this, I don't think anyone's really going to bat an eye if you eat kind of crazy when you're in an amusement park, right? But we're going to start right off the day with a breakfast Dole Whip. Wow, that is... I gotta be honest, that's a choice, and not personally the way I would start off a day that I'm gonna be riding rides. That's for sure. I mean, if I'm being perfectly honest, none of what they have listed so far is anything that I would have gotten. Maybe the wrap, but if it's spicy, then yeah, definitely not. Because the way I look at it, it's gotta sit on my stomach while I'm going through all those rides. Because at least personally, when I go to an amusement park, that's what I'm there for. I'm there for the rides. I can get food anywhere, but I can only ride roller coasters and cool rides at amusement parks. So at least personally, because I don't go very frequently, and if I do get an opportunity to go, it's usually like once a year, I'm trying to cram in as many rides as I possibly can within the time frame that I've got there. So at least personally, say my husband and I were going to take our kids up to Cedar Point for the day. I mean, we always time it so that we show up right at opening, like as the gates are opening, and hopefully we get there a little sooner than that actually, so we can line up and get in as soon as they open the gates and get to rides before the lines start getting out of control, basically. So at least personally, we're going to leave early enough that we're probably going to grab breakfast on the way. And that way I'm not going to have to spend time that I could be on rides trying to go seek out food. But admittedly, I know that's just personal preference right there. But I gotta say, if you're gonna start off your breakfast with something really sweet and not any protein, and then you're gonna be expected to walk around what is most likely gonna be a hot and sunny amusement park, I would definitely suggest a lot more protein and way less sweets to start off the day. But let's see what else they have.
Sarah got a Dole Whip float from the same place. Later on in the day, I was thirsty for ice cream, so we got old-fashioned hot fudge sundaes from Dino Bite Snacks. I got chocolate ice cream and Ashley got strawberry. Sarah helped Ashley finish her sundae. What a good sister. Over at
Okay, and we're going strong with the sweets still. And again, I understand when people are on vacation, or again, if this is something you did like once or maybe twice a year, I don't think anyone's going to really bat an eye at this. But knowing that this is what they do for content, I mean, that's a lot of sweets if they're going to be eating like this all the time they're going to parks.
Bites, Katie got the Zazu Dole Whip Coconut Lime Float. She also got the Golden Margarita. Sarah got the fried chicken sandwich at Restaurantosaurus, which surprisingly was really good. At this point, I was feeling a little peckish, so Ashley got the chicken sandwich as well, and I had her fries. Deanna got her go-to, which was the classic chicken tenders and fries. Katie got the Tequila Sour.
Oh wow, I did see at least a bottle of water in there. So even though they didn't mention it, I'm glad to see that at least one of them, it looks like, was getting water. And hopefully they all did and they just weren't talking about it, because that's something that, oh my gosh, like when I'm in an amusement park, forget drinking just about anything else. I might have something to drink with a meal, like maybe a pop or something, but more often than not, it's going to be water. Or at least maybe this is, again, just my own personal experience, because every time I swear that I go to an amusement park, it's been like super hot and the sun is just relentless, and all I want to do is just guzzle water all day. So I'm glad to see that at least some water made an appearance here.
From the Restaurantosaurus Lounge. This is a go-to for her. In closing out Animal Kingdom, Deanna got a classic bag of cotton candy. We headed over to Hollywood Studios where Sarah got some popcorn. And then for dinner, we headed over to the ABC Commissary where Deanna got 2 orders of fries. We all love the fries here. They're so different from other Disney fries. Katie.
Okay, so it looks like for 3 meals, some of them have had chips and fries at every meal now. I mean, again, that just seems like a lot of carbs, a lot of sweets. There is some protein I'm seeing here with some of these chicken sandwiches and burgers, it looks like. But again, very, very carb heavy, very sweet heavy. And so many of these foods they've just listed are just kind of making my stomach hurt thinking about eating them and then going and riding a ride. So I guess maybe if you just wanted to go to the amusement park solely for the food, this could be a day you could do potentially. But I just got to imagine that if I ate even a portion of some of this food and then got on like a Tilt-A-Whirl or Millennium Force, or I mean any of the rides up there, that I probably am going to regret it. So, but again, I do understand that we all go to amusement parks for different things, and there's a lot of different things at amusement parks for people to enjoy. But my preference is definitely on the rides, and so far, all of these foods that are listed would not have been a good combination for me and rides.
We got a gluten-free chicken sandwich. Ashley got the shrimp tacos and really liked them. Sarah had been wanting to try the buffalo chicken grilled cheese for a while, so that's what she got. I got the grilled chicken sandwich and forgot to take a picture of it. Let us know in the comments which park we should do this at next.
Okay, so there we have it. That's some of the food offerings that they do have available down there. And I do have to admit, for 5 people, if that is all the food that they had throughout the day, and that was all the food that they ate in the day, not just at the park, but for their day in entirety, I mean, that wasn't an exorbitant amount of food for 5 people, but nowhere near enough protein. That much I can definitely see just visually looking at this, and a whole lot of sweets, which if you're then going to go on rides afterwards, again, and maybe this is just my personal experience, but I can't imagine that that's going to feel all that great on your stomach to eat a whole bunch of sweets and then go ride some rides. So then the other thing that did pop into my head while they were running down this whole list of everything that they got at the parks is how much money that must have cost to eat all 3 meals plus snacks and drinks inside the park. So I gotta admit, I've seen a lot of these what I eat in a day at amusement parks, but I don't usually find prices accompanying it. So I am genuinely curious what that food bill would have cost at the end of the day for all 5 of them. And yes, I'm aware that if you have a season pass at an amusement park, you may be able to add on a dining pass as well, or there's food plans, etc. So I know that those things do exist, but I am genuinely curious how much this would cost if you were paying for each individual item without a meal plan for all 5 of those people for one day at Disney. Because even though it wasn't an exorbitant quantity of food per se, they didn't have like 2 dinners or 2 breakfasts or anything like that. But I gotta imagine all of that food added up to a lot of money. So I gotta admit, the last time I was actually at a sit-down restaurant inside of an amusement park was actually right after I got kicked off of Millennium Force that time. So once I had been kicked off of the ride, the one thing I will definitely admit is I really do wish there were a more elegant solution for individuals who aren't able to ride the rides. When you're kicked off the ride, you basically don't have anywhere to go on the platform, and the only way you can go, at least the way most rides are set up, you're going to have to snake your way back through the line of everybody who's queued up to ride the ride. So it's not like you can make your way to the exit and get through without people noticing that you got kicked off the ride. Oh no, you've got to say excuse me a whole lot as you're pushing your way back through the line until you can kind of cut over to where the exit line is. So that was one thing I will definitely admit. That was embarrassing for sure. And it was already bad enough that I had gotten kicked off the ride. And now I knew everybody was aware that I got kicked off the ride too. So that I will say, I do wish there were a more elegant solution to that. But I also do understand that roller coasters and most amusement park rides in general, they're all designed for efficiency. So that's why everyone is corralled into the one queue and then split off into the trains. And then you have your platform where you load, and then you have your platform where you unload. It's all designed around efficiency, and I totally do understand that. But when you do have that instance like myself, when you get kicked off of Millennium Force, yeah, ooh. Ouch. That was definitely an ego bruise, I gotta admit, big time. So we left the ride, and I must admit, I was so disappointed that I was honestly just kind of ready to go home at that point. It was about 4:30 in the afternoon, and at least typically, I stay all the way till closing. I stay until they will not let me ride any more rides, and they tell me to leave the park. I'm gonna get my money's worth out of my ticket. We're gonna stay from open until close. Guaranteed. If I'm taking that trip, I'm getting the most out of that trip. At least every other time that I've gone. Again, it's like 4:30 in the afternoon, and I'm just ready to cut the day short and just call it a day. So my husband was like, well, why don't we at least get something to eat, and we'll just go ahead and sit down and regroup and see how we feel. So we went to a Johnny Rockets, and I sat down and I ordered the biggest, greasiest, nastiest cheeseburger I could find. And while they were cooking my order, he and I sat there and talked about how much fun we had had in our day up until that point. That yes, getting kicked off that ride really did suck, and I was very disappointed that I wasn't able to ride my favorite ride, and then consequently my husband had gotten off that ride as well because he didn't want to ride it without me. And while it was disappointing I wasn't able to go on Millennium Force, then I was a lot closer to getting on Millennium Force at 240 pounds than I was at 360 pounds. And I gotta admit, in that time it took my burger to cook and then bring it to the table, I realized that that burger wasn't going to get me any closer to the true goal that I had that day. And that goal that I had was to ride Millennium Force. And I knew there really wasn't anything that was going to help me achieve that goal that day. But I knew that that cheeseburger wasn't the answer either. I mean, I did eat part of it because, yes, I ordered it and I wasn't going to waste food or money, let's be fair. But I definitely didn't finish it. I certainly didn't overeat just because I had spent money on it. I sat there in the booth of that restaurant and made a promise to myself that I was going to continue on the path that had led me to where I was, being down 120 pounds. I wasn't going to let this derail me just because I was upset. I wasn't going to run back to emotional eating the way that I had in the past. And even though that was a familiar habit, I understood by that point it was a bad habit that I had had. And so despite having that moment of self-pity in the restaurant and ordering that cheeseburger to kind of deal with those emotions I didn't want to deal with, I realized that that wasn't going to get me any closer to where I really wanted to go. And more than anything at that moment, I wanted to see this through. I wanted to get to my goal. And not just ride Millennium Force, but never have to worry about riding on an amusement park ride ever again. To never have to worry about weight limits, or if I was going to fit in something, or sitting in seats at a concert or a ball game, or anything that I wanted to do in my life. I knew I had to continue on the path that led me to where I was at that point, and that eventually I would get to where I wanted to go. So yes, I did eat some of that cheeseburger when they brought it to me, but I wasn't going to use that cheeseburger as a replacement of dealing with those negative emotions in that moment that I just didn't want to feel. And it was that moment where I'd been tested, where I had to deal with something incredibly negative with my emotions that I just did not want to. What was supposed to be a day of fun and excitement was now forever shadowed by that in my mind, right? And instead of turning to food, I realized that the only way out was through, that I was going to have to continue on the path that had led me to this point, because that got me so much closer to riding Millennium Force than I ever had been at 360 pounds. So we did go ahead and stay the rest of that evening and stayed till closing and had an absolutely wonderful time riding a whole bunch of rides the rest of the night. And I went home and did exactly what I had set out to do. I stuck on that same path. The very same things that I had done to lose the first 120 pounds, I did continue for that following year. And within that following year, I lost another 20 to 25 pounds or so. And so the following year, we did go back and we showed up again right at opening. And my husband and I booked it straight from Millennium Force, sprinted all the way there. And we made it to the third train of the day. Third train. We get all the way up to the front of the line, and I gotta admit, I was incredibly nervous because what had just happened the year before. I sat down, I pulled the lap bar down, and it went down 3 or 4 clicks this time instead of just 1. And I thought to myself that had to be a good sign, right? And I gotta admit, when I was able to pull that seatbelt across and click it inside that seatbelt, that was the single most satisfying click of my entire life. Because I knew that all of my hard work had finally paid off and that I was doing the thing that I had wanted to do more than anything. That I knew that all of my hard work was paying off and that even if it was going to take me a while to get to my final goal, as long as I kept moving forward, no matter how slowly, no matter how many small steps I took, every small step in the right direction will eventually get you to your goal. When people talk about losing weight and they talk about their non-scale victories, oftentimes it'll be in the form of clothing or sitting in a seat or maybe sitting on an airplane comfortably. And for me, it will forever and always be that click that I got on Millennium Force. And yes, we rode it and it was so worth all of that work to be able to ride it again because it's still my favorite ride. Still to this day, my absolute favorite ride. And even my husband had to admit how awesome that ride was and that it really was worth the wait. So all of that being said, what do I think of the plus size park hoppers? I mean, quite frankly, I think their content is fairly benign. I know that I am not the intended audience, but I do see how this could be helpful for individuals who are trying to figure out whether or not they would fit on rides. Now that being said, I do have to admit something I noticed when I was scrolling through their TikTok feed. While I was able to find TikToks of them trying out test seats and riding rides, I must admit I found a lot more TikToks revolving around their outfit of the day, or what they all ate in a day, or trying a specific food, or wondering whether or not they will fit into a certain restaurant. Not a ride, but a restaurant. So again, I do understand that a lot of people go to amusement parks and a lot of people go for lots of different reasons. You could go for the entertainment, you could go for the food, you could go for the rides, you could go for a multitude of reasons to an amusement park. That I do understand. But I will admit, if you are larger and you are trying to see if you will fit into rides, it does appear that they have a lot more content centered around food than it does the amusement park rides. So knowing that there are a lot of different people that wish to go to amusement parks for many different reasons, the one thing that I will admit that I had to learn the hard way, if you are a larger person and you wish to ride amusement park rides, there's a good likelihood you will have to lose weight in order to fit in the restraints. But maybe that's just me. Let me know down in the comments below, what do you think? I'm genuinely curious and I love reading all of your responses. That is where we will leave things today. I thank you so much for joining me. Please be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe, and I will catch you on the next one. Go Guards! Bye! Pokey heard me talking about the Guardians and literally tried to jump up in my arms. Oh, baby, I know. Look at this. Hi, Pokey. Oh. You keep putting your tail right in my lip gloss.